Welcome back. This is going to be a lecture on communication and how animals communicate. Animals are going to communicate for a wide variety of reasons. They may communicate to help locate potential mates, food, peers, offspring, or shelter. They may use communication to warn others of danger or predators. They may also use communication to be social. Whatever the reason for communication, first it must be initiated from a signal by a sender. It must be transmitted through the environment and received by the receiver. The receiving animal must decode the signal and determine its intended meaning. If it's for a potential predator, obviously the receiver will try to hide. If it's for food, the receiver will try to find the sender. So it depends on what the communication is, how it's transmitted, and then how it's received. If you find the physiological track of communication, you can see many sensory neurons as well as central nervous system neurons are going to be required for this process. And we've been talking about that over the past several lectures, just how many different neurons, sensory neurons and motor neurons, are required for all of these different senses. Communications can either be silent or they can be through sound. Pheromones are a type of communication where the sender sends out molecules of a scent, and this is to communicate with a receiver. These odor molecules are again going to be produced by an animal and sent to other animals for communication. The other animals can communicate through visual means once they receive those pheromones. If the pheromones are indicating mating, then the receiver will look for the sender and initiate mating. If the pheromones are sent as a warning signal, then the receiver will receive those and initiate a response as well. Fireflies use flashes of light to communicate. They can be communicating what their gender is and their fitness and other forms of communication such as maybe potential food and ready to mate. Bees also use their body for an elaborate dance to communicate food sources with other bees. This is called the waggle dance. Once a bee has located a food source, they'll return to the hive and move in a very specific pattern, indicating the exact food source location to the other bees. This increases the foraging efficiency and adds to the cooperative nature of the colonial animals. All of these types of communications have limitations. Pheromones are not a very rapid form of communication, and visual communication doesn't always travel very far and can be blocked easily by solid objects. Animals have adapted acoustic transmission to have more directed communication and in some cases over long distances. These forms of communication can be in conjunction with each other. Sound communication can be used in conjunction with pheromones and with visual cues. All communication must travel through the environment. And again, animals live in a variety of environments, ranging from small microhabitats all the way up to enormous areas of land. And communication is going to vary also in aquatic versus terrestrial habitats. And so we'll talk about all of these different ways that animals communicate in these habitats and different parts of their body that they can use. Many insects produce sound, but only some of them are audible to the human ear. If you've ever been on the East Coast on a summer day, you can hear cicadas communicating all around you, and sometimes they are incredibly loud. Insects can produce sounds in several different ways. Stridulation is one way where insects produce sound by rubbing one part of their body against another, as done in crickets, grasshoppers, beetles, and many others. Insects can produce sound by banging one part of their body against the ground. Cockroaches do this by banging their abdomen against the ground. Other insects vibrate a body part, usually their wings, to produce sound. Bees, mosquitoes, flies, and other insects produce sound in this manner. Cicadas and some other insects have drum-like membranes called tymbals that they can vibrate to produce sound. Finally, some insects can force air or fluid out of their bodies, producing sound. Auditory production can be on almost any body part of the insect. Some insects produce sounds with their legs, some use their mandibles, their antenna, head, or any other part of their exoskeleton. Insects may produce sound as alarms. Other sounds may be produced in courtship, and some sounds may be a warning sound. Whatever the sound is for, animals will occasionally use body position to affect the sound and add to the communication. Some insects can be quite efficient at producing loud sounds. Others are much more quiet, and some are not within the hearing range of the human ear. Have you ever been in the wilderness with no man-made sounds around? Insects can sometimes be deafening. Have you ever tried to sleep in a tent with the crickets calling at night? If you're not used to it, it can really keep you up. Specialized sound production is only possible in some fish. Most fish produce sound when eating or swimming, but only some can produce sound for direct communication. Some fish produce sounds through stridulations, like we talked about with insects. Fish can rub their teeth together, and some can rub two bones in the skulls to make sounds. Some fish can use the bones in their fins, called rays, to produce sounds through stridulations. Other fish produce sounds through drumming. This drumming is produced by specialized muscles connected to their swim bladder. These sonic muscles contract, expanding the swim bladder when they relax. The swim bladder snaps back into shape, creating a drum-like sound. And you can see that here, the contracting sonic muscles, and then when they relax, they snap back together, producing a sound. As with insects, the location and morphology of these sonic muscles and swim bladder may vary between species. Fish can use these sounds for mate attraction, predation alarm, and territorial warnings. In some species, only one gender has sonic muscles, and in others, both will have them. Again, these are specialized sounds and are only capable in some species of fish. Sound production in amphibians is a well-developed mechanism similar to mammals. In frogs, birds, and mammals, sound production converts airflow to acoustic energy. This occurs when air in the lungs vibrates elastic structures. When these elastic structures change the airflow, they generate acoustic energy. In frogs, air moves from the lungs through the larynx over vocal cords into a vocal sac. This vocal sac, just below the buccal cavity, which is down here, resonates the sound produced, as well as recycles the air to cut down on energetic costs. Have you ever heard frogs ribbiting all night? Can go on for quite a while. By recycling the air, frogs can produce sounds for extended periods of time. Sound production is very active in frogs and requires significant muscle contraction and energy input. The fact that sound production is so energetically expensive attests to its necessity. As with the previous groups of animals discussed, frogs produce sound for territorial warnings, mating, and distress, or when they're being eaten by a predator, and also for announcing its location. I hope you have all heard the song of a bird. If not, just open your window one spring morning. In birds, sound production utilizes the airflow to vibrate elastic structures stored in specialized structures called the syrinx. The syrinx is located here, where the trachea bifurcates or splits into two bronchi, and we'll talk about this when we talk about respiration in birds. There are membranes in this structure, the syrinx, which vibrate when air flows over them and produces sound. There are two membranes in each of the bronchi under independent neuronal control, allowing for two different sounds. The syrinx is regulated by syringeal muscles, which control the airflow from the lungs to moderate the sound. This system is very efficient in using all of the air in the lungs and it's not too energetically expensive compared to the frog that we just talked about. Terrestrial mammals also use airflow from the lungs to vibrate vocal cords. This is similar as seen in frogs and birds. Obviously, we don't have vocal sacs in our mouths. Our vocal cords are a bit different than the syrinx, but the concept is the same. Most mammalian sound is produced on exhalation, but some animals are able to vocalize during inhalation. Some chimpanzees can produce sound during inhalation, as well as some human babies while crying. The vocal cords act as mechanical vibrators with inherent elasticity. When air is forced over these cords, the sound is produced. Humans also use their tongue, their teeth, and their lips to affect sound and change the phonics. Hopefully you can tell now my lips are moving, my tongue is moving, my teeth are moving. Many other terrestrial mammals make hissing sounds through their mouth structures in similar ways. In many species of terrestrial mammals, the male vocal cords grow larger than female vocal cords. In some of these species, this change may be hormonally triggered, and in others, it's strictly an inherited anatomical difference. Aquatic mammals vocalize in a different way. Toothed cetaceans, or odontocetes, you can see their skull here, produce sound in the nasal passages using phonic lips and air sacs that are just below the blowholes. You can see them in red in this image here. Here's the blowhole, the phonic lips, and then these are the air sacs. These animals pass air through the phonic lips, vibrating them similarly to how vocal cords vibrate. Air stored in the nasal air sacs is recycled similarly to how frogs use their vocal sacs. The sound resonates from the nasal passage through specialized fat on the melon or the forehead that we talked about when we talked about echolocation. This fat is called acoustic fat and acts as an acoustic lens, propagating and directing the sound forward. This specialized sound production and direction system allows for toothed whales to echolocate, and we talked about that last lecture. Sound production in baleen whales, like this skull here, this is from a blue whale, and you can see the different shape of their skulls. Baleen whales are not able to echolocate. They don't have this same kind of bowl-like shape to the front of their skull, and they also don't have that acoustic window on their lower jawbone, their mandible. However, it is thought that baleen whales have a larynx similar to other mammals and pass air over this. Baleen whales are capable of producing sounds and even producing long whale songs, and they use that for communicating with others of their species, their conspecifics. However, baleen whales have different skull structure, as we just mentioned. They don't have that same melon like the odontocetes, and therefore they cannot echolocate. So in summary, there are many forms of communication in all these different animals, and communication is going to be used for many different purposes, but it is very clear that it is an important role in animals for communication to be able to occur to find mates, to help locate food, and to warn for predation. And animals will go through many different extremes to make that happen.